My mother-in-law took over my father's company behind my back. Then I divorced her son. The day I found out my mother-in-law had secretly taken over my father's company wasn't the worst day of my life. The worst day came 10 minutes later, when my husband looked me straight in the eyes and said, without even blinking, "It's her company now, Emily. Stop fighting. You'll only make things worse." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The man I had loved for 8 years wasn't standing beside me. He was standing beside the woman who had stolen everything my father had built. But they had both made one fatal mistake. They believed I knew nothing. What they didn't know was that only an hour earlier, I had discovered a dusty envelope hidden inside my father's old office safe. Inside was one document, one forgotten signature, and one secret capable of destroying every lie they had spent months creating. My name is Emily Bennett. This is the story of how my own family betrayed us, and how they lost absolutely everything. My father, Michael Bennett, started Bennett Industrial Solutions with nothing more than an old pickup truck and a rented warehouse. For nearly 40 years, he worked 16-hour days. He missed birthdays. He missed vacations. He sacrificed almost everything so that one day I would inherit a business built on honesty instead of shortcuts. He always told me, people can rebuild money. They can't rebuild trust. Those words stayed with me for life. When I married Ryan Carter, my father welcomed him like the son he never had. Ryan was smart, confident, hardworking. At least that's what everyone believed. He quickly became involved in the company. Within 2 years, Dad promoted him to operations director. Employees respected him. Clients liked him. Even I believed we were building our future together. There was only one person my father never fully trusted: Ryan's mother, Patricia Carter. She always smiled too much, complimented everyone, remembered every birthday, brought homemade cookies to the office. Everyone thought she was charming. My father simply called her dangerous. Whenever I asked why, he'd just smile. "Some people don't raise families," he once told me. "They build armies." At the time, I laughed. Now I understand exactly what he meant. Everything changed after my father suffered a mild heart attack. The doctors assured us he would recover, but they insisted he stay away from work for several months. Dad hated every minute of it. Still, he reluctantly handed daily operations to Ryan. "Only temporarily," he reminded everyone. "Nothing permanent." Ryan nodded. Patricia hugged him proudly. I noticed something strange that day. She smiled longer than anyone else. Much longer. I should have trusted my instincts. Within weeks, little things began changing. Longtime employees suddenly retired. Department managers I'd known since childhood quietly disappeared. Nobody gave clear explanations. Ryan always had one. They're ready for something new. They're pursuing other opportunities. The company needs fresh ideas. It sounded reasonable, until I realized every person leaving had one thing in common. They were loyal to my father, and every replacement had some connection to Patricia. Former neighbors, old church friends, distant relatives. Even her bridge club accountant somehow became chief financial officer. When I pointed it out, Ryan laughed. "You're overthinking everything." Maybe I was, or maybe I simply didn't want to believe my own husband was lying to me. Then one afternoon, I visited the office without telling anyone. The atmosphere felt different. People stopped talking when I walked by. Several employees avoided eye contact. Even the receptionist looked nervous. As I reached Dad's office, I froze. His nameplate was gone. In its place, a polished brass sign read, "Patricia Carter, Executive Chairwoman." I stared at it for several seconds. My hands began shaking. This had to be some kind of mistake. I pushed the door open. Patricia was sitting behind my father's desk. His family photographs had disappeared. His old leather notebook was gone. Even the antique clock my mother had given him before she passed away had vanished. Patricia looked up with a pleasant smile. "Oh, Emily," she said warmly, "you should knock before entering." I couldn't even answer. "This is my father's office." She folded her hands calmly. "Not anymore." Those two words echoed inside my head. Not anymore. I walked straight out and called Ryan. He arrived 20 minutes later. Instead of looking surprised, he looked annoyed. I was going to explain everything. "Explain what?" I shouted. "Why your mother is sitting in Dad's office?" He sighed. "You're making this emotional." Emotional? My father's company was disappearing right in front of my eyes. And somehow, I was the problem. That was the first moment I realized something much bigger was happening behind my back. I just didn't know how deep the betrayal really went. The next morning, I drove straight to my father's house. He was sitting on the back porch, a cup of coffee untouched in his hands. He looked tired, but when he saw my face, he knew something was wrong. "What happened?" he asked quietly. I sat beside him and took a deep breath. "Dad, why is Patricia sitting in your office?" His face went completely pale. "What do you mean?" "They replaced your nameplate." For several long seconds, he didn't say a word. Then he stood up so quickly that his coffee spilled onto the porch. "Get my keys." An hour later, we walked into the company together. The moment employees saw my father, whispers spread through the building. Some looked relieved. Others looked terrified. When we reached the executive floor, Patricia stepped out of the office wearing an expensive navy blue suit. She smiled as if nothing was unusual. "Michael," she said sweetly, "you should be resting." "This is my office," my father replied. Patricia didn't move. "I'm afraid the board has approved a temporary restructuring." My father frowned. "What board?" Ryan appeared behind her. "The new executive board." My father looked stunned. "There is no new board." Ryan calmly handed him a folder. "There is now." Dad opened it. His hands began shaking. Several pages contained signatures approving new directors, new voting rights, and emergency management powers. Everything looked official. Everything. Except one thing. My father whispered, "I never signed these." The hallway became completely silent. Ryan didn't answer. Patricia simply crossed her arms. "You've been ill, Michael. The company needed leadership." "No," my father replied. "It needed loyalty." That night, I couldn't sleep. Something about those documents felt wrong. Around midnight, I drove back to the office. My security badge still worked. The building was empty. I entered my father's old office. Most of his belongings had disappeared, but one thing remained. An old steel safe hidden behind a framed landscape painting. I remembered the combination. My birthday. Inside were faded folders, family photographs, and legal files dating back decades. At the very bottom lay a sealed envelope with my name written in my father's handwriting. For Emily, only if something feels wrong. My heart started pounding. Inside was a copy of the company's original shareholder agreement. I read every page. Then I stopped breathing. According to the agreement, no ownership transfer, board expansion, or executive appointment could ever become valid without two signatures, my father's and mine. I had never signed anything. Never. The next morning, I quietly visited the family attorney, David Lawson. He had worked with my father for over 30 years. The moment he saw the agreement, he looked shocked. "Where did you find this?" "In Dad's safe." David slowly leaned back. "They never knew this copy existed." "What does it mean?" He smiled for the first time that day. "It means they built an empire on paperwork that may be completely worthless." I felt hope for the first time in weeks. "So we can stop them?" He shook his head. "Not yet." "Why?" "Because if they realize what you found, They'll destroy every remaining piece of evidence. Over the following days, I pretended everything was normal. I smiled at Ryan. I had dinner with Patricia. I acted like the obedient wife they expected. Inside, I was collecting evidence. Late every night, I copied emails, financial records, board meeting minutes, security logs. Then I discovered something even worse. Nearly 27 new employees had joined the company within 6 months. Every single one had been hired without my father's approval. Every single one had a direct connection to Patricia. Former coworkers, relatives, friends, neighbors. Even her personal hairdresser's husband somehow became procurement manager. This wasn't hiring, it was an invasion. My father's company had slowly been replaced from the inside, exactly the way he had warned me years ago. Some people don't raise families, they build armies. Now his words finally made sense. One evening, Ryan walked into our bedroom while I was closing my laptop. He stared at me. "You're acting strange." I forced a smile. "I'm just tired." He stepped closer. "You've been asking too many questions." For a second, I wondered if he knew. Then he reached into his pocket. "I bought you something." It was a diamond bracelet. Beautiful, expensive, probably paid for with money from my father's company. He fastened it around my wrist. "I love you," he whispered. Those words used to make me feel safe. Now they felt like a threat. I smiled back, then silently made a promise to myself. This would be the last gift I ever accepted from him, because I already knew something he didn't. The document hidden in my father's safe wasn't the only secret. David Lawson had just uncovered another file, one that could send someone in the Carter family to prison. And when I learned whose name was on it, my entire world shattered. The next morning, David called me with the news. "The forensic report is back," he said. "Your father's signature was forged." I closed my eyes. It was finally over. Instead of confronting them immediately, we waited until Patricia announced a company-wide meeting to celebrate what she proudly called a new era. Every employee gathered in the conference hall. Patricia stood on stage, smiling confidently. Ryan stood beside her. Just as she began her speech, the doors opened. Our attorney walked in with 2 investigators. The room fell silent. David calmly placed the original shareholder agreement on the table. "This company was never legally transferred," he announced. "The signatures were forged, and the entire restructuring is invalid." Patricia's smile disappeared. Ryan looked at me in disbelief. "You knew?" he whispered. I nodded. I knew enough. Within hours, the fake board members were removed, the fraudulent contracts were frozen, and my father officially regained control of his company. Ryan begged me to forgive him. He claimed he had only followed his mother's advice. But betrayal is still betrayal, no matter who suggested it. A week later, I signed the divorce papers without hesitation. As I walked out of the courthouse, my father smiled and put his arm around my shoulder. "You didn't just save my company," he said. "You saved our family's name." For the first time in months, I felt completely free. Sometimes losing a marriage isn't the end of your story. Sometimes, it's the moment your real life finally begins.